Hi, I'm Ron Exler, Director and Principal Analyst in ISG Research. I'm Lead Analyst and Manager in the ISG Provider Lens research service that I'll tell you a little bit more about later, and I oversee the public sector research. It's exciting to welcome you to the third in our series of webinars discussing the issues important to accomplishing the missions of your agencies and how service providers fit in. Replays are available for the previous webinars discussing trends in procurement and the future workplace in the U.S. public sector. So let us know if you want those links. Today's discussion will center on what's happening in the Microsoft ecosystem and how service providers add value. We'll answer questions at the end, so please submit them in the comments chat. As a leading global research and advisory firm, ISG partners with our clients to determine a future vision, lead rapid change, and realize the value of your digital investments at scale. ISG has been active for 15 years, providing both advisory and research services. The research division provides the market data and detailed analysis you can use to inform decisions to improve outcomes. And importantly, ISG was selected to be part of the latest NASPO Value Point Master Agreement for IT research and advisory services. I'll briefly introduce the speakers, and then we'll dive into the discussion. The speakers today are Nathan Fry, Bruce Guptill, and Peter Crocker. Nathan is a lead partner of ISG's U.S. Public Sector Practice. His experience includes more than 20 years of service to state and local governments in such diverse areas as financial and compliance auditing, process improvement services, and internal control reviews. Peter is lead analyst for the U.S. Public Sector portion of the ISG Provider Lens Microsoft Ecosystem 2022 study. He is a thought leader and content creator who has more than 15 years of experience researching and analyzing the software applications and technology services segments. His focus has been mobile, cloud, digital transformation, and enterprise applications. Peter holds an MBA in marketing and a BA in psychology. Bruce is a principal analyst for ISG's Provider Lens Public Sector Research Series. He is a 30-year veteran of IT market research and analysis, focusing on how disruption and change in enterprise and public sector business drives the development and improvement of business software, services, and providers. So Bruce, over to you.
Everybody, thank you for making time for us today. As Ron mentioned, we're going to be talking about what we're seeing in the Microsoft partner ecosystem, specifically as regards the U.S. public sector. And the first thing that we want to do to set up this discussion, and one of the important aspects that we're covering in our public sector research, is four core issues, four core areas of need and interest that government and other public sector organizations are telling us are very, very important to them and around which they need to make decisions today. The first is the ability to secure collaboration and be productive everywhere and anywhere as we need to. The COVID and associated relocation, if you will, of combinations of remote and on-site work, as well as bringing in and exposing us to more areas, more aspects, more people, more entities to interconnect with and to collaborate with, has really raised that need to a top tier. To do this, we also need solutions that can help us reduce manual processes, because the more virtual we are, the more we need to have automatable capabilities. And as many people on this call know, we're having a lot of trouble not only keeping, but hiring the kinds of staff, the kinds of capabilities, this people with skills that we need for this new digital virtualized environment. And we also need capabilities to help us meet compliance and reporting requirements which have become much more complex as we make the environments more virtual. And that means we need help modernizing the workplace environment. We need the platforms, the services, we need the skills, the knowledge, and the overall resources to make all of these things happen cost effectively and as rapidly as possible, because underlying all of this is a significant need to trim, reduce, and then sustain lower operating costs. So why the Microsoft partner ecosystem? Microsoft, first off, is the de facto business software environment, and we don't see that changing in any significant marketplace, any vertical or industry worldwide for years to come. Microsoft's Azure cloud platform already accounts for 25% of global cloud use, and that's rapidly increasing in the public sector area, government, as well as associated public sector entities. And Microsoft has one of the largest, if not the largest, ecosystem of development, services, and software, and frankly, fundamental technology partners of any of the software and services vendors in the world right now. So there's a lot of ways we can go. There's a lot of choices that we can make, which means that we need to understand more about what choices we should make and how to make those choices. So I want to bring in my colleague and the lead analyst for this report, Peter Crocker, to discuss what we're looking at in this report, why we're looking at these things, and why each of these is going to be important and helpful. So Peter, thank you very much for participating. In this study, we're looking at 4 significant areas within the Microsoft partner ecosystem, the kinds of development and services and software and technology providers that can help clients, that can help our public sector clients especially, benefit from specific types of capabilities. The first one we're looking at briefly is the Dynamics 365 environment. Peter, can you give us an idea as to why this is so important?
Well, as you mentioned earlier, thanks, Bruce, by the way, for the introduction. So yeah, Dynamics is key, just for around, as you mentioned, compliance, and reporting and accessing data when you need it, and there are all sorts of legacy systems still out there in the public sector, and providers' ability to migrate some of the applications and data to more modern infrastructure and applications is key to be able to deliver reports and make sure you're compliant with regulations. So
Dynamics Dynamics is really underlying all of the ability to share information, files, reporting, and everything that goes along with that, right?
Exactly.
So on top of that and around that, we have Office 365. It probably doesn't need a lot of introduction or explanation, but we see a lot of changes going on, including migration to from a traditional Office environment to 365. Is that pretty pervasive right now?
Yeah, I mean, especially as you mentioned earlier, the challenge with COVID, it's the need to collaborate on building spreadsheets and just collaborating around documents, and then communications with Viva and just email is just vital when you can't collaborate around a conference table in an office. So it's vital to have these solutions.
So one thing that's relatively new, we haven't covered this in previous Microsoft studies, is this Power Platform. Now, it's not necessarily a formal platform offering as we often think of it from Microsoft. What are the key pieces of Power Platform, and why is this important to understand?
Well, one of the biggest challenges in the public sector and also in the commercial space, but more so in the public sector, is just manual processes. There hasn't been a lot of time or thought put into how do we streamline these processes and digitize them. So there's just a huge pent up demand for automation and providing frontline workers the ability to create applications and create workflows. And with COVID, this lack of attention to these things is very acute. So the demand for these types of automation, no code, low code solutions across every sector, but particularly the public sector, is very important.
And the final category that we're looking at, the quadrant that we're using to compare and position organizations, providers, is managed services providers, MSPs. The Azure cloud, as I mentioned before, accounts for about 25% or more of all cloud traffic in the world right now, and that percentage is growing as cloud traffic grows. And the roles of MSPs, the roles of managed services providers, continue to increase because of that, right? It's just that much more complex and that many more choices to make.
Yeah, absolutely. And being able to leverage all the capabilities of different clouds and different architectures, whether it's hybrid or multi-cloud, is important. But then just managing the cost and the security. Outsourcing that to someone that's an expert in those areas is key for just optimizing operations for public sector entities.
All right. So we're already seeing some improvements and benefits within the public sector. We've talked to obviously a lot of providers, but a lot of public sector entities as well, state and municipal governments, public charities, large NGOs, non-governmental organizations. And this is a really brief summary of the key benefits that we're seeing. The reduced operating costs with long-term savings. This includes the ability to work with fewer, fewer full-time position people, the reduced staff problem that we see. And we can get, as you mentioned before, more adaptable, more enhanced security, compliance. Peter, the environments that fully support hybrid realities. This is something that you talked about very briefly, and I'd like to spend a few seconds on it if we can right now. Are these public sector organizations, government and otherwise, is there really this big move to the hybrid reality, the virtual multi-cloud environment? Is that something that we see expanding?
Yeah, absolutely. There are a lot of benefits to not relying on one type of architecture or cloud. Resilience. If one cloud goes down, you can shift workloads to another. So you can you don't leave your constituents out to dry, and you can provide better services. So that's really one of the big drivers.
Mm-hmm. And of course, productivity. We can measure it better, but we can improve it. And some of the improvements that I remember seeing from the research as we were going through everything in the last few weeks, we have entities reporting improved productivity of somewhere between 10 and 30%. Is that jibe with what you're seeing?
Yeah. I mean, I think that's numbers are probably even higher. Just going from really tedious, antiquated manual tasks to automation. I think as you get better at it, your efficiency of scale are just going to be much greater.
And I think the bottom line here is that working with the partners, working with the services providers, the developers, the tech partners, is what's necessary to make all of these things happen. And while obviously there are no guarantees, we are seeing that the improvements that are available almost immediately tend to more than cover the short-term costs of engaging with these entities. Is that right?
Absolutely, absolutely.
Yeah. So the big challenge then is, how do we figure out who to partner with? How do our client organizations understand what it is that makes providers more or less suitable? And of course, every instance is somewhat different and somewhat unique, which is why clients work with organizations like ISG to help them understand that. But if I was going to go through the portfolio strengths that we look at and the key market strengths, the presences and capabilities that we look at, I would point out that the ability to deliver robust implementation across a variety of disciplines, but again, that experience in multi-cloud environments built with Microsoft Azure, that seems to be those seem to be two of the ones that stand out. What are some of the other, one or two others that you see on the portfolio side that are really critical for clients to get help with, and where the vendors, the providers need significant resources?
Yeah, I mean, I think integration and migration; those are sort of table stakes, sort of must-haves. I think sort of modern applications and migrating to sort of cloud native applications, in delivering quickly through agile and DevOps, are key. But also, one of the things that differentiates some vendors from others is looking at the problem from a more holistic standpoint, and not just delivering technology for technology's sake, but really understanding the problems and delivering better outcomes. So that's one thing that's really important.
Okay, and then on the other aspect that we look at things from is what we call the market strength set of capabilities, which is where the providers are and how they work within the marketplace to deliver the value to clients. And so things like partnerships themselves, the length and duration of Microsoft partnership can be obviously pretty important, but that includes the scope of certifications, the skills that they have been trained on and certified by Microsoft and critical partners, right? Those are two of the more important aspects that we see being required.
Absolutely. I think also just to focus on the public sector is a key market strength. Navigating the procurement process and the nuances of working with the public sector is a bit of a skill, and not every vendor or provider is willing to make that commitment. So I think that's a big driver on competitiveness in the public sector market. And then flexibility.
And as we note in the bullet list, that investment includes ongoing investment in the public sector business, because so much has changed, and we look forward to so many changes and disruptions in the coming months and next few years at least as well, right?
Absolutely.
All right. Well, thank you very much, Peter. I'm going to turn things back over to Ron and to Nathan Fry to walk us through ISG and the public sector. So, Ron.
Thanks, Nathan. You want to walk us through what you're up to these days?
Thank you, Ron. And as mentioned in the introduction, my name's Nathan Fry. I'm the lead partner of ISG's U.S. Public Sector Practice. And on behalf of our dedicated public sector team, I just want to thank you all for joining us today. We're excited about this partnership with the research team to expand the reach of our studies to include relevant public sector content and additional market analysis. And although this collaboration is relatively new to us, the public sector practice has been focused on state and local government and higher education for the past 24 years. So I did want to take just a moment here and one slide to give a little background on our practice and the things that we focused on. So we've traditionally been significantly focused in the ERP market space, and we've done a lot of work with organizations in both ERP selection, implementation, and large administrative systems transformation. So we'll combine our functional expertise in state, local government with proven methodologies that supports the full project lifecycle, from a business case to selection work, contract negotiations, and ultimately an implementation oversight role in many cases. Over the years, we've changed our focus from an on-prem situation to now we're transitioning our work products and our approach in the marketplace to focus on SaaS and cloud-based solutions, and the way that systems integration partners are deploying those tools and software. So, we've had a focus on statewide projects over the years. We've been fortunate to serve 24 states in that capacity. We also work with cities and counties and higher education, including both community colleges and large universities. And I think importantly, we've maintained our independence from software providers and systems implementation firms is a key premise of our practice. So again, thanks everyone for being with us. And let me turn this back over to Ron, who's going to cover a bit more about upcoming public sector studies that we have on the table. Ron?
Thanks, Nathan. And again, if you have any questions, please write them in the comments window, and we're pretty close to getting to those questions in a minute here. So the ISG Provider Lens research service complements ISG's advisory services for the U.S. public sector that Nathan just talked about. In 2022, we're tackling 9 different topic areas in which ISG will evaluate and publish reports focused on services and solutions for the U.S. public sector. Subscribers to the service not only get online access to the reports, but also gain access for discussions with people like Peter, Bruce, and Nathan. Subscribers from U.S. public sector organizations receive a discount for the annual subscription via ISG selection to be part of the NASPO agreement for IT research and advisory services. That's the end of the prepared comment. And again, if you want to submit questions, please do so in the comments window. Before we get into the questions, note that the webinar replays and slides are available. So please let John know if you want a copy of them, and his email is shown, his contact information is shown here. Please reach out to him with those suggestions, or if you want to learn more about ISG. So let's go to your questions. You mentioned, Peter and Bruce, when you were chatting, that not one size fits all for how organizations adopt Microsoft solutions. So what kind of service provider skills are needed for the larger state organizations, for example, compared to some of the smaller states or local government implementations?
Okay. Well, let me kick off at least a piece of the answer. The biggest challenge is making sure that we have the right service provider or providers to coordinate to our environments. Again, not one size fits all. Your mileage may vary, etc. So the capabilities, the scale, the scope, but also the skill sets, most importantly, the skill sets that might be relevant to some of the larger state organizations or NGOs for that matter, may not always translate to perfectly to the smaller implementations or to the smaller areas of need. That doesn't mean that the largest and most complex providers can't do what the smaller organizations need done, but they may not be tuned, right? They may not be as aware of the resource availabilities and constraints that smaller organizations have. They may not be as practiced in that, and they may have more of a, let's say, a larger holistic viewpoint beyond what the smaller organizations might need. So it really comes down to your level of comfort with, as Peter pointed out, the experience, the public sector experience, but also your sector experience, your type of organization, your type of function, your type of regional capabilities, and so on. Peter, Nathan, anything to add to that?
Bruce, I'll just add that I think in my experience with states, and really, states are unique type entity where even the small ones are very complex relative to many other organizations. So I think you mentioned the ability to scale. So clearly for large states, I think what we've experienced is all states have similar issues and similar needs. The large states have a very complex and perhaps even more political organization structure that drives the implementation approach and the need for collaboration. It's harder to implement a command and control type transition in a large organization, large state versus maybe a smaller one. So that's one that I've experienced in working across the spectrum of states. That really, I think, if an organization is going to serve both hierarchies, you need to be able to adapt your approach to those realities.
Yeah, I just echo on what you said, Bruce, and reiterate sort of business outcomes in understanding the nuances of what the requirements are, whether it's a point solution at a smaller state or a strategic initiative, and being able to tune your delivery to not only deliver technology but deliver outcomes.
It really is focused on the business outcomes, especially more and more with the current environments. Ron, what's our next question?
So one of the things you talked about was one of the 4 areas you covered was Dynamics 365 and how that can be a challenge to implement. So what are the skill sets U.S. public sector organizations should be looking for in a partner to help them ensure a successful implementation?
Well, to some extent, I'm going to put my colleague Peter on the grill here because he was more involved with the individual provider assessments and comparison. We all were, of course. But Peter, is there anything that stands out on the Dynamics side in terms of what the better providers bring to the table?
Yeah. So thanks, Bruce. I think managing legacy migrations is a big one. There are still so many legacy systems out there in the public sector, and being able to migrate those without any downtime, without losing data, and doing it quickly, I think is one of the key differentiators. So you don't have to spend a lot of time with the system down and not be able to serve your constituents.
And so we don't lose. So we don't lose things too.
Yeah. Right. Peter, I'll jump in and just say, as from my experience with a lot of various ERP implementations, I would advocate that our service providers really need to have an organizational change management focus built into every phase of the project, because as you've mentioned, a lot of these are legacy transformations from perhaps systems that have been around for anywhere from 10 to 30 years. And this is not only a technological change, but a major change for the end user community. In fact, several states I've been associated with have used Dynamics 365 as basically the development platform or the foundation for new programmatic systems that they're using in their state organization. So it's not just the traditional, hey, let's implement Dynamics as an ERP solution, but let's take that and extend it to the programmatic needs of the states and their particular agencies. So that's a slight difference, but I think an important difference. And what I've seen is not only that change of technology, and they'll come along with that, but preparing the organization for what that means differently in the use of the system, the maintenance, and ultimately how the end users will adapt and adopt the new technology.
So do you think, Nathan, that the biggest risk then in these migrations is actually the people factor, and or would you? It depends on the situation.
Well, I think it's situational, but as I think a lot of studies would imply that the people change really is your most significant ultimate barrier. If the goal of the project is to successfully accomplish the mission of the organization, which I presume it usually is, then getting the people on board with the change is always critical. But I will say that the technology underpinnings are quite different. I think we're seeing government entities come along with the move to the cloud. At first, it was an uncertain change for them, but I think the benefits are becoming more obvious. Redundancy, the capabilities to expand and with the needs of the organization, and just to keep the applications current in a SaaS type environment are all huge benefits that are now being realized in the public sector. But yeah, I think organizational change is a key, and I think we would expect that to be part of a program that a service provider would bring to the table.
Well, thanks, Bruce. Peter, any last comments?
I just want to mention, based on what Peter and Nathan were both just saying, that ability, that need to continue to improve, develop, and deliver is another reason why we're looking at and seeing so much interest in the new Power Platform aspects as well. Everything from the low-code, no-code capabilities that are being delivered by Microsoft through their partners. And the ability to translate that into, let's say, frontline user adaptability and capability is increasingly important. And given the new virtual environments, the new digital work environments that we have, and the need for speed to make the changes when we need them, where we need them, it's another aspect of helping to assess and compare the providers.
Well, great. Thank you, Peter, Nathan, Bruce. I appreciate the discussion today, and I think it was useful. And to everybody who attended, thank you very much. Let us know if you have questions. We're happy to provide replay information to you. And again, John's information is on the screen for any follow-ups. Wherever you are in this ecosystem, we're happy to work with you. So thanks, everybody, and have a good afternoon.
Thank you.
Thanks a lot.
Thank you.